Welcome to another episode of NeNeisan Podcast, your weekly source of visual novel goodness. I am Mar, and together with Tauros we shall venture into another discussion about VNs. This episode we're diving into iconic topics in VNs. Endings, good, bad, and even the fact that there can be multiple. To help us with that, we brought a fellow content creator who ended many a visual novel. Welcome back, NeNeisan!
Hello everyone, my name is NeNeisan. I do YouTube, make videos, reviews for visual novels, and thank you for having me.
Yes, we're very happy to have you back, NeNeisan. As you heard from MR, this episode is all about the wide world of endings in visual novels. So, just to get this topic started, what can you tell us about endings, NeNeisan?
Endings is kind of one of the most important aspects to the story. I know for some people it can completely tie together every doubt and kind of a bad aspect about a story and turn it into a good thing, but for others it can be the opposite. It can completely ruin what felt like a great journey and just leave off with a bad taste. So certainly there's two sides to, is it the journey or is it how it all ends?
From a literary perspective, I've always had the opinion that an ending is just a natural conclusion of the journey, as you mentioned. Stories all need a backbone. They all need character who wants something, and there are obstacles, and the protagonist finally comes across the final climatic challenge, whether he succeeds or fails, and the ending is just a natural conclusion of that. I believe that visual novels and storytelling in general should have an ending that naturally concludes from the hero's journey. As simple as that. What do you think, MR?
Yes, it's such a hard topic because, like you said, it should be a conclusion, that hero journey that started somewhere. He or she had many experiences, and that's the culmination of what was learned, what was developed, and what transpired. Just because in VNs it tends to have such variety when it comes that have maybe a bad ending that shows you a consequence of bad choices that you can make. It's not as easy. It's not as straightforward. And in other media that has just an ending. That's it. That's the total conclusion. And just because the VNs have that interactivity and you can choose how the story develops, it makes it different. But on that note, what are your guys' favorite ending?
Ooh, definitely one of them has to be quite a contentious one between its fans is Umineko no Naku Koro ni. Episode 8.
Oh boy.
There's a lot of choices that are kind of made that flip the script on how you think it's gonna end. And for a mystery story, especially the first 4 episodes, that's mainly what draws in the viewers. It's well thought out mystery and the idea of how is this all, what is the truth behind everything? Why is everything so vague, and what are these seemingly contradictions that has some sort of truth behind it? How is that all going to tie together? And with Umineko, it takes a very bold choice. It really relies more on an ambiguous tone and one that's built up since episode 5 through 8. And because of that drastic shift in tone and ideas of what a mystery should be, it has caused some contention, but is one I very much enjoy because it all ties back thematically and the overall meaning of what it's trying to convey.
is it for you, even though it breaks some convention or expectation, the fact that it serves as a payoff is more important?
Yeah, it's definitely more of an emotional payoff, but there's an underlying like moral that's been trying to like peeking its head out from episode 1, and it really focuses in on that after episode 4. Episodes 1 through 4 is deemed like the question arcs, whereas 5 through 6 is deemed as the answer arcs. But answer is not really correct. It's more so of a extra hints or a small path to hopefully you'll see the truth as you're walking along. And it all focuses on the reader's interpretation, what they get from it, and what they're expecting from the ending.
Now, not to go too deep into spoilers or whatnot, but I am aware that the ending to Umineko is a very highly divisive topic, or maybe even controversial. It has its supporters and it has its detractors, right? What do you think of that whole situation, NeNeisan?
I think it's a natural conclusion with how it set itself up and in the first half and the path and direction it went in the second half. It's definitely focused more on the emotional side of things in the second half. It takes a look at the characters, how different ideas can be construed depending on the perspective, which focuses a lot on the second half. You have it often takes two people fighting over how people can skew the truth to fit their ideas, and exactly the emotional turmoil that it can take on the person that truth is about. And this all kind of culminates to one of the newly introduced main characters that that finally takes its focus in episode 8 and their emotional journey to dealing with with truths that have really hurt them throughout their life.
Very interesting. Especially when you mentioned that it was a logical conclusion to the emotional beats. Which, again, I don't want to get into spoilers, and I haven't even read Umineko myself. Because on the face of it, Umineko is a mystery. And yet, here you are saying that you very much enjoyed it and praised it for its emotional beats. So do you think that disconnect between what some people expected versus what other people were expecting and what they got, do you think that all has a part to play?
Definitely. I mean, it's only natural to be invested into one side or one aspect of a story and expect that to kind of carry you throughout. So when it's not necessarily dropped, but it takes a different turn than piecing everything, than having the story piece together everything and go, here's sort of what happened and what this means. It's definitely left the reader having to wonder exactly why they have them think for themselves why all this really happened. Because even the culprit, it's a murder mystery that never gets directly identified. And it's sort of exactly left up to the reader's interpretation, and it fits in there thematically.
Interesting. I just realized that you spent the whole time talking about your favorite ending. As for my ending, I forgot I need to answer the question too. I think I would actually pick out 428 Shibuya Scramble as a great ending.
Oh.
What makes it unique is that 428 Shibuya Scramble has 5 different protagonists. And as you read each, quote unquote, hour of the story, like basically a chapter, you have to go through each of the 5 protagonists. And they all have their own plot lines going on. You have some about struggles of family relationships. You have some of rescuing the girl and saving the day. You have some where it's a struggle of their ideals. And 428 has one big overarching plot that ties all of the characters together. But when one character's story ends, it is definitely a wrap to their own character arc with their growth, or maybe, how they stay the same. And either way, you get a payoff to their own character arc in a way that still ties into the story at large. 428 really pulls off a great balancing act between respecting the individual characters and their own tiny paths, and then balancing it out with the huge cataclysmic events going on in the big picture. And I didn't really realize it until now when you asked me what my favorite ending was, and I look back on it and reflect on how everything comes together perfectly to the point where you see like this cast of characters and you can really pick out all of them as just having incredible showcase of what they're made of. I think that's one example of how visual novels really can have great endings by utilizing, the various things that make a VN a VN.
You really nailed it there. I think that's that holds up really true. Thinking back on it, kind of how each protagonist has completely different lives that they walk, and yet somehow all become intertwined in even the subtlest of ways that leads to this conclusion.
Hey, Mark, do you have a favorite ending? I know you asked that of us, but you're here too.
I have to admit, I've been listening intently to your answer and shuffling in my mind which out of those candidates I would still put at top, because I have few of them. And I think you're mentioning tying everything together in a neat package when it all just pays off. I think I have to go with Evenical. I have to say that the way they ended that title specifically, and how the final confrontation is a culmination of character in sequence, it's something that it stays with me. I keep going back and thinking about that, how well realized that is, how troubled those characters are, how over the course of that journey you get to know them, and how by the end of the journey each and every one of them faces their fear. And that's something very sweet. I have to say, that ending, it was fierce competition, because I have few more that have that tying up everything in a nice package way, but I feel like Evenical takes it from me. I keep going back to it, even though it was I don't even remember how many years, a good 5-6 years ago I read it, and I keep still thinking about that one. And I feel like the ending that stays with you and its moral speaks to you on a deeper level, it deserves my spot, my favorite ending.
Nice. Especially when you highly praise Evenical as much as you do.
It has many different threads. It has a very interesting journey, both the active one, the one you participate in, and the one you untangle in a historical sense, as you listen to the tale of old, you listen to the history of that land, and you revisit the journey of heroes from the past. And it is an allegory to the journey you undertake, even if it's in reverse order. But by the end of the title, you made that journey your own. You no longer tread what was once tread by ancient heroes. No, you went ahead. You went beyond that. And that's really special.
On a different note, Mr. mentioned something earlier that I actually really want to ask you about, NeNeisan. What are your thoughts about bad endings? Typically, so far we've been approaching endings as the sort of literary stuff about storytelling. But as far as VNs are concerned and all the opportunities they bring, are bad endings also valid in your eyes?
I certainly think so. I mean, there's some VNs where you kind of tell that the effort isn't really put into it. It's just you made a bad choice, try again. But they can also kind of explore different ideas of a character and explore other parts of the world that you wouldn't see otherwise. For with Fate's Day Night, for example, there is a couple like there's one in the Fate route where if you make a choice, Shiro gets kidnapped, and they allude to something that happens 2 routes later that is really just an offhand comment in there, but you still get this like underlying world building that you wouldn't have otherwise. And there's another one in Heaven's Feel, or two in Heaven's Feel actually. One where you kind of can still see the main character Emiya's growth through kind of sticking to his old self and abandoning his main task. And then another one with quite loved Sparksliner High.
Oh, yeah.
That final confrontation.
Wow, yeah, Fate's Day Night's a perfect example. Because, thinking about it, I guess you could say there are two kinds of bad ends. There's the gameplay kind where it's just, okay, you made the wrong choice, go back. You don't have enough affection points, whatever. And then there's some bad endings, like you mentioned, that really serve to showcase the characterization or to add to the world building. Like you mentioned, Sparksliner High is famous. That Mind of Steel ending is another famous bad ending. I think it really highlights the what ifs, where the story could go if things played out just a little differently.
And because of those like stakes that fight against the main character, and you can tell that things aren't going to go in a happy way. There's that depth to them that, if they did succeed or if they manage to find their way out, you can't really get that with a standard ending.
I mean, oh my god, bad endings. Listening to NeNeisan's answer, I'm still battling myself because I don't like bad endings. But I can't. I can't say that about Sparksliner High. I can't say about Mind of Steel. I can't say about those Fate endings that allude to things happening in the future because those were really cool. I would even hazard a guess and say Sparksliner High was one of those I did consider saying one of my favorites because it is so different. But it is in a way a non-conclusive one because you get you didn't finish what was going on at the time and you have that longing for an answer to a conclusion, but it's still very, very unique because it showcases some final stand for that main character and what he believes in. That was such a great exploration of how things would end up.
And at the same time, it also explores another character that's mostly been sidelined plot reasons. And you finally see that sort of development and appreciation they've held for someone else.
Yeah. I can't say definitively I hate all bad endings. I definitely prefer good endings and happy ones, even though I dark fantasies. But I can't deny there is a potential of exploring development of characters in bad endings and what ifs from the bad side of things, so to say. But I still wouldn't wish my character pain to appreciate its development in good ones. Okay? That's just me.
Okay. I mean, you don't care much for bad endings because you just want to see happy stories, right? You want to see happy stuff with the characters. Okay.
Yeah, I this is kind of like how I approach it. I like to believe that good people and those characters deserve a happy ending. despite circumstances, despite the environment, despite the grim nature of that setting, I hope for them to reach a happy ending. I don't want bad endings for them. That would suck.
Okay. Moving on about VN endings.
No, you have to say that
What?
too. Come on, you
What?
have to
What do
answer
you
that
mean?
question.
I already told you, I like bad endings too. I feel like they're another layer of interactivity with visual novels. I also think they allow for interesting explorations of different paths, maybe. You know, sometimes they're just bad endings where it's like, you screwed up, and it's like, okay, whatever, that's just a pain in the butt.
Yeah.
But hey, I mean, when you have like the top of the mountain, like how Fate Stay Night handles its bad endings, you know, that's what you admire.
Yes, I agree.
Mm-hmm.
The same carries over to Tsukihime remake as well. There's a few in there that foreshadow what's yet to come as well.
Ooh, very nice, very interesting. NeNeisan, what are your thoughts about multiple endings in visual novels? You know, we're coming off the heels of Fate Stay Night, and we talked about bad endings. But what about visual novels that have different routes? Or maybe even not even different routes, maybe even just something, well, okay, I won't say. But anyway, stories that have different potential endings.
That's probably one of the best aspects for visual novels, not only from narrative side, but from a character side as well. Like with a lot of like romance heavy VNs, you can kind of see a sort of different development in the main character between each heroine and how they kind of play off of each other pretty well. Like with Clannad, this you kind of see the main character is pretty much a delinquent who's very depressed because of his circumstances in life, and how he finds someone that he has passion towards and wants to finds a sort of purpose to continue in his life, and how that affects the heroine and how they play off of each other. Clannad has a lot of different routes. I think there's like 9, I think, maybe a bit less, more or less. But each relationship has the main character become different in the end. You see how he grows to be a different person at the end of each route, and how that plays off of the heroine's own circumstances, doubts, and insecurities.
Yeah, and you see them in new light, right? Thanks to that exploration. But on the topic of, I have a very important question, okay? NeNeisan, okay? Because I said you're one of my people, so answer this. Did you read all of the endings?
Yes.
Oh,
I
okay,
might not get
great.
every bad ending, like especially if it has like a track record of not going in the right direction. But all the good endings, true endings, the main endings, I'll read through all of them.
Okay, correct answer. Okay.
Oh my goodness. Because with multi-route, character-focused endings, I feel like that's what gives, you know, visual novels even more of a storytelling impact. Like you mentioned, you have several different heroines, you have their own character routes, and you can experience so much more character growth. It might be too much to pack into one story, you know, but once it branches out in like a typical moege or character-focused VN, you can dedicate the next, you know, however many 5-10 hours devoted to one character and her growth. And then after that, you can go back to the common route and branching point and then go on to a different character. And so you get so much more impact, you have much fuller cast and richer storytelling, right?
Oh, definitely. You can and especially feels a lot less jarring than having all those character routes packed into like a linear format, like some anime adaptations. They don't necessarily, they may feel a bit off as it jumps from this character's things and how that plays into the current events while the events from some other route is going on at the exact same time. It can feel a little bit, but getting to experience it singularly, there's a lot more of an intimacy between you and the heroine.
Ooh, that's a good point.
To push back a little bit on that, I feel like some of the titles get a lot of criticism when you pick a route, you pick a character, and then the rest of the cast just disappears into the ether.
Ah, that's true as well.
Obviously, if you make it well, the ending, and those characters keep being relevant to some capacity, it's forgivable, okay, that they aren't as common. But if they disappear completely, there is a jarring disconnect. Okay, I grow fond of all the cast. Why the rest disappeared? Hello?
Mm-hmm.
And then that can kind of kill motivation to like after you
True.
beat the character's route you really like. You're like, "Oh, I don't really like these guys as much. I don't see a point in continuing on."
True.
Oh no. Although with like Moege's, when you have a whole cast of heroines, again, that's something that the reader can decide who the best girl is, and then you can just dedicate the story just to them.
Mhm.
So I mean, that is one plus side. In which case, if you're choosing a heroine to get into the romantic relationship with, then on the one hand, you can figure, what's the point of everyone else? Not that I agree, but I do see the appeal sometimes.
Yep.
I do want to add, though, that there is one title that I actually thought multiple endings was bad. It would have been better as a linear story.
Okay.
And for that, I would say Symphonic Rain. It has an interesting route structure where you're given choices and all of that, but it's somewhat enforced between, I think either like Val and Lycée. Then you've got like Tortina's, and then story stuff. And then either way, the route structure is somewhat enforced. And I've mentioned, I think it would be better served as a linear story because that's honestly how the big overarching narrative seems to be structured. When you finish some of the earlier stories, they just kind of end on a cliffhanger. Nothing really gets resolved, and it just ends on a big wham notice. And it's like, okay, that's the end of the route. Now go through the normal daily life back in common route to get on someone else's route. And you're like, what the heck is that?
Huh.
We've spent a lot of time talking about how these character routes can be individual, character growths for one specific person. And I don't think Symphonic Rain did that. They just served up as this is one piece of the bigger puzzle, and then just kicked me back to the title screen.
I could imagine that being pretty jarring, especially because VNs are essentially set up in the way to where you expect a 3-act structure for one heroine each route you go into.
That's a very good point about the 3-act structure. So, I mean, in some ways, could you consider heroine route being the start of its own story?
I would say kind of the first divergence from like the common route and their interactions together is kind of like the first part. At least that's how I see it.
Interesting. That's an interesting point.
Yeah, because now that I think about it, some VNs incorporates routes as one of those 3 acts, right? So like a split would happen, and it kind of starts your act 2 on the 3-act structure. But some VNs take it a step further and say, okay, the common route exhibits 1, 2, 3-act structure, and then the route begins anew the cycle. Right? Because they introduced the personal drama instead. Because you had a group dynamic and group drama and group conflict that got resolved in a common route, and that concludes to some degree the 3-arc structure. And something completely new starts off when the route picks up. But others instead just continue on, and that second or third act depends on the character.
It definitely seems like it depends on the visual novel,
Yeah,
because I
yes.
think that of it, like the common route being its own 3-act is true for like Aokana. That's kind of how it's set up. You are introduced to all the characters. You have this goal you all fight for. You do it, and then the character routes branch off.
Because I would give you an example of what I believe to be a 3-act structure inside the character route, Muramasa. Right? They are so wildly different, and they happen after a common problem has been solved to some degree in different ways, because that's what diverges into routes, but they begin the cycle anew.
That is true. And each character's route kind of branches off to new possibilities and
Yes. Yeah.
its own like conflict and like thematic message between the heroine and Kageyaki.
Yep. Exactly.
There's one last thing I want to ask you about, NeNeisan. Do you think episodic visual novels can have good endings in the way you described, like showcasing the character growth and just the themes of a VN?
I certainly think they can. I haven't read too many. It's mainly just been like the When They Cry series and then Higambana no Saku Yoroni, which has been the episodic stuff. And though kind of the When They Cry series kind of uses that, has a 3x structure in between each episode and kind of ends off on a huge like reveal or cliffhanger. Higanbana is a lot more a normal episodic story where like there's split across 2 games, there's like 20 chapters, and each chapter has a new like conflict and certain like dilemma of a character going through something. And each time and throughout, I'm trying to figure out how to word this, sorry. With each episode, it focuses on a different main character with a different problem, and throughout the episodes as you go along, those certain problems persist for other people, and you kind of put together what it's trying to say and the, I guess, thematic like cohesion of the subjects of bullying, depression, that it kind of ties together. As each episode you get glimpses into past main characters that kind of make an appearance, and you see their growth later on.
Although I didn't read Umineko, I'll try to answer the episodic nature, right, of the route and endings, etc., with the 9-9 example, okay? And I felt the episodic films that do it well have the tendency of starting an episode with a hook, right, that hinges on a premise or a theme, okay? And ends on a hook that hinges on a question not being answered. And I feel like when that cycle is done well, it creates that continuity between the episodes. And in 9-9's example, the execution on the first episode wasn't that great, with the last hook of the ending in the episode wasn't that great, because the question being answered wasn't that interesting. But on the next ones, they did improve on that cycle of, okay, the title starts, they open with a hook that is about the premise, about this one episode, and ends with a, okay, I got almost all the questions answered, but that one, oof, I wonder what it will be. And that leans into, okay, I can't wait for the next episode. How do you feel like that relates to Umineko?
That's almost spot on, because every episode it kind of leaves you off with just what is happening.
Uh-huh.
There's always like this main question of who is this witch Beatrice that is kind of the main antagonist and is the one who has been told to set everything off. This witch on an island that has been sent to murder the family for an unknown reason. And as you go along, it's very hard without direct spoilers, because each episode has its own like climax that needs to be like experienced completely blind, because we'll have you go, how can it possibly continue from this? And then it starts back up and you're like, oh, this is how. And it loops each time.
Interesting.
I mean, Umineko and episodic VNs are the example of series that have endings, but each entry has an ending because of the thematic continuity. It has somewhat connect, right? You cannot have multiple endings. And on that note, I wanted to ask, you guys about your opinions about true endings, a conclusive closing off of a story. Do you like it? Should it be at the end? What's your thought about true endings?
If true endings are probably like, if I hear about it, it's probably the one I'm looking forward most to. Key does this a lot with their VNs, like with Air in from Air, Clanad with After Story, Little Busters with Refrain. There's always that expectation that even if you don't like necessarily a heroine's route, you can kind of be hopeful that see where their development grows and how this is going to contribute to the true end. And as you go through, I think true endings offer that opportunity to really tie everything together thematically, character-wise, and it's just a kind of a question of whether it succeeds in how well it succeeds in bringing everything that you've like spent however many hours into one nice ending.
And this is the most common take on true ends, right? It's a title that has many character or many variants of an endings that unlock a true path, right? Conclusive, finale, if you could. But that not necessarily has to be the case, because now I tie back to the episodic nature and having sequels, right? And one example I often bring is when it comes to true endings, Sengoku Runs is the first title I've read that says true end is the first one you get. And every single other ending is a what if exploration. And why they did this? Because Runs is a series. So obviously it has to have one definitive end that serves as a basis for the sequel. But if they introduce multiple endings, they have to be exploration of what if it didn't end that way. So they approach the title with, okay, we want to show you how it connects to the others. This is why the true end is first. And then if you wish, you can just explore other possibilities.
I've seen stuff like that before, and personally, it really saps my motivation. Knowing that, the story is over and you're just seeing what ifs and bonus content and bloopers and stuff, and it's like, well, okay, this is funny, but there's no real hook for me to drive myself to keep playing,
With true ends particular, I feel like if they're put at the end of of all like the what if scenarios, you can tie in all those small little moments of development and kind of thematic meaning all into like one ending and have that continue push you forward to like with Rants the further entries.
Okay.
But I know, I'm aware many people are not like me, and they all have their own approaches to reading visual novels and playing games. So like in your case, Ambar, you love that kind of bonus stuff and the what ifs and the world building. Yeah, you just can't get enough. And it's like, hey, there are many people out like that. Many people who enjoy all sorts of different kinds of endings. So on that note, that's a good time for us to wrap up this episode. Thank you again so much, NeNeisan, for being a guest here on our podcast. You were a blast to have.
Oh, thank you very much. I'm very appreciative that you guys invited me out to have the opportunities to speak about this.
It was amazing talking with you. Always a pleasure. And I'm glad we reached an NSI ending. And with that, thank you for all our listeners, and venture out.
Venture out.
Later.